and I'm located right next to the old Shane's Deli in Wheaton, in downtown Wheaton. And sometimes I'm called a psychotherapist, sometimes a therapist, and sometimes a counselor. They're basically all the same thing. And if you ever want to know what a counselor does or doesn't have in terms of credentials, you always look at the alphabet soup at the end of the name on the card or on her credentials. Sometimes you'll find it on Psychology Today, you'll find it on their website. And if you look, what I have is an MS, a CADC, LCPC, and an NCC. So if you ever want to know about a therapist, you can either Google those letters or you can call me and I'll tell you about them. In my case, I have 2 master's degrees, and they really say the story of my life. My first master's degree is in, if you can believe it, mathematics. I was a math teacher. I taught in the Chicago Public Schools. I taught at Lane Tech, taught at Morton East. I taught at the University of Chicago, the lab school. I did some writing for the University of Chicago. And what I decided to do after having kids is to go back and try, what is it called, your right side of your brain or your left side of your brain? There used to be this thing that you're either left-sided or right-sided on your brain. And when you're thinking about your left side, that would be your analytical. So I started out in my left side. And then as I went on in life, it occurred to me that I really was driven and almost spiritually pushed to go into more of my right side, which would be creativity, which would be sensitivity, empathy, emotional connections. So there goes my next letters, MS. So about 15 years ago, I decided to make a vow that I would go into what I truly, truly loved, and that was clinical psychology. So I got a master's degree in community mental health. Sometimes it's called clinical psych. And I then went and got licenses. The first license that you tend to get is an LPC. Then if you go on, you can get your LCPC, which is the highest of the psychotherapist. And then I also got a CADC, which means that I can work with alcohol and drug addictions. Now, somebody might ask, what's that NCC? That NCC just means that if we were able to switch among states and do psychotherapy in different states, I would be capable of doing that. But at this time, Illinois doesn't allow us to trade states. So again, you can always see a therapist by their letters, and that sort of tells you the whole story of their life. What I tend to do is use the mathematics in with kids to relieve mathematics anxiety, school education. I am a licensed high school teacher and middle school teacher, so I can really feel for kids when I work with kids. I've worked with marriage and family. I have training in addictions, I said, trauma, anxiety, depression. I'm a generalist, and I was taught as a generalist. So anything in the DSM that I've gotten training in and that I've gotten supervision in, I can diagnose and I can work with you on. It's interesting to go back to that right and left brain situation, because a guy named Roger Perry got a Nobel Prize for his work in 1981 on split brain theory. And this split brain theory was really hot when I was in college. Everybody talked about it, everybody liked it. And actually now it's sort of a theory that's gone away. They have proven with subsequent research that right and left of your brain has to work together. I just thought it was a cute way to begin, but it is interesting to understand that through the history of psychology, research proves something and then disproves it. So many times what we call evidence-based practice which would mean based on research, can change over time. So the theories can change, some of the beliefs can change. And when you take one of those quizzes on left and right brainedness, you're doing it just for fun. Because particularly in math, they've proven, which is an interesting study, is that both sides have to be working in coordination, or actually it doesn't work out too well. And that's been seen on people who have survived injury to the brain. Okay, I want you to get a piece of paper. I want you to get a pen, and I will be going over a lot of information tonight. And from what I understand, the slideshow and my face will be on YouTube for the Wheaton Library. So you'll be able to see it like tomorrow or the next day, anytime you want to go on YouTube. But for tonight, you might pick up one or two things that you may actually want to think about even overnight. It's interesting too, to analyze just for a minute, what were you feeling when I was talking about the right and left brain? Were you kind of driven to think about it? And were you kind of remembering something that you might or might not have known about it? Well, that's a very good way to lessen your anxiety through diversion, through intellectualization. So these types of things actually are good defense mechanisms. It's a way of letting your brain think about something else. So coming tonight actually is a good way to give yourself a break and to intellectualize anxiety so that you don't have to have it ruminating and driving you crazy all the time. Okay. The way that I tend to express anxiety is actually to buy books. So if you look behind me, you'll see that when I get nervous or I want to learn something, I buy another book. A lot of people have behavioral addictions. I don't think that mine is an addiction, but on the other hand, when I'm stressed, I tend to want to buy, and buy books is a good thing for me. You probably have similar things that you've observed in yourself. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. Of course, it would be a balance. So another thing that you might like to do is, if I am triggering you tonight to make you feel anxious or to make you feel a little bit unsettled, or maybe you recognize some of the symptoms that I'm talking about, if you start to feel triggered in any way, you start to have nausea or a little bit of sweating, something like that, my suggestion to you is a pleasant one. Just look and concentrate on the flowers that I've put on every slide. Okay, I didn't put pictures that have to do with anything, just flowers. And when you look at them, they're all local flowers. They're all from Wheaton, so you'll probably recognize maybe some of the areas if I do some landscapes. And you can use a little bit of mindfulness, meaning zooming in to the flower, forgetting what I'm talking about just for a minute, and give yourself a little visual pleasure. And if you use that mindfulness once in a while, you can actually relieve yourself of some tension. So it's a way of shifting your focus to something pleasant and ignoring the rest. So that's why the flowers are there, and you can tell me your favorites at the end. Okay, we're experiencing a psychological, medical, biological, spiritual crisis in the form of COVID-19. We say that we're fine, we're all fine, but what comes out is, wash your hands. Did you wash your hands again? Did you do it? Did you do it really well? Don't go outside. If you go outside, make sure you have your mask, make sure you have your gloves, make sure you're protected. Stay calm. You start to have images of fears and consequences. You have to have your food delivered, or you go and pick it up. Or even if you go inside the jewel, you're very suspicious of somebody who might get too close. Listen, I have to work on Zoom. That means that I'm looking at you guys, but I'm looking at a green dot on my computer. That's the way it is. I had to go to telehealth, meaning that I don't see my patients anymore in person. I see them over the computer screen, which is a different experience. It helps for people who are farther away, but for people that are close, they actually enjoy coming to my office. I've been doing most of my telehealth, if you can believe this, from the attic of my garage. And it would have been funny tonight if I was up there, because I was going to call these the secret addict talks. But it was just luck that I was able to get into my office today and set up the computer and the internet that had gone off while I was gone away. So I was lucky to get here. The other thing is the constant news alerts and constant updates, just driving one crazy. Every day, my husband will say, "What's up? What has happened? What more restrictions?" I know that we're going to go into phase 2 and phase 3 of opening up again, but even that, you're not quite sure, because today was the highest death rate in Illinois yet. And these kind of things will weigh on you, even though you may feel fine on the outside. So inside, there's some kind of anxiety, there's stress, there's a change of everything. So these kinds of things add up, including the isolation. I want to see some of my friends. I want to see my son, my daughters, my other son, and I can't do it. So it becomes a little bit surreal, maybe even a little bit too much to bear. So I'll try over this hour to give you techniques for reducing this anxiety and for increasing a connection in your own heart to beauty, goodness, creativity, and love instead. There was a big study, I think it was done by NIH, and it was done on, I got this from one of the learning training sessions that we did. And what are we anxious about, and for what reasons? So 46% of us are extremely anxious, I mean clinically anxious, that would mean that they would come to somebody like me, about possible loss of loved ones, though they aren't currently experiencing anyone who has those symptoms. Then 15% of us are extremely worried or extremely anxious about possible loss of loved ones who are presenting with mild or moderate symptoms of COVID-19. 6% of us have anxiety over possible loss of loved ones who are presenting with severe or end-stage symptoms. 10% of us are worried about the death of loved ones, and 24% are concerned about death of loved ones from other causes, with their distress exacerbated by the conditions of the pandemic as they are now. So as you can tell, we're really quite affected by this. During this talk, I will give you skills that will help you work with this anxiety and with this stress. And the skills will go from private skills, like coping skills, your internal intrinsic skills, your communication skills, relationship skills, parenting skills, cognitive behavioral skills, language skills, and spirituality. As you can see, we'll be all across the board, and what we'll try to do is give you such a wide variety of topics and skills that maybe one of them will actually help you. So don't try to get everything down. Don't try to be overwhelmed by even the quantity of what I say. When I get nervous, my voice goes a little fast, and if you slow it down a little bit for yourself by writing down only what applies, you'll be better off too. So the first skill that I'd like to go into is private skills. It's intrinsic inside of you for self-actualization, for stability, and for grounding. One way of doing this is to have a centering thought. So you pick your own centering thought. It's like a mantra. And it would be a thought that you either write down, put on a wall, put in your wallet, or maybe just keep it in your heart so you can bring it up. I have a tendency to want to say to myself, if I'm upset or if I'm lost for any reason, or if I'm feeling anxiety that I can't deal with, I say, let anything that I touch be better for the fact that I have lived and that I have been here. Some people might try to use some other mantra. For example, this will surely pass. We will become stronger. Another one, I'm not what I appear to be. I'm growing and getting better. I forgive and forget regularly. The strength of words is something that triggers your brain into more than just words. It's an understanding. It's a deep-seated feeling that you can actually make it through this time. And if you give yourself worry words, you're going to be worrying. If you give yourself strength and words that calm you down, whatever that personal connection to those words are, you will be far better off. Okay, so you'll reconnect with what you wish to be and the example that you wish to give. Another skill, or sometimes people say like a trick, is to come up with 3 adjectives that define yourself. So like for this talk, I hope I'm coming across as fairly calm, even though I might not be all the time, fairly educated, and also a little bit easygoing, meaning that we can go in different directions without my feeling too stiff to the PowerPoint. Some people might have, you might come up with something else for yourself. For example, you could have an adjective of being strong, calm, informative, stable, a good listener, a person who does good, a practical person, dependable, simply able to create a good time amidst stress and isolation, gentle, soft-spoken, intelligent, connected, peaceful, directed, altruistic, and selfless. These again would be 3 words that you might put on an index card. You might put it on some kind of fancy little piece of paper and then put it in your wallet, put it on the refrigerator, anything like that to remind yourself just for a half a second, a nanosecond, just where you'd like to be. And maybe when things are going wrong with anxiety, with depression, with any kind of mental issue, you can recenter and come back to where we are together. The whole idea is self-actualization, which is what this slide is all about, was developed by somebody called Abraham Maslow. From the 1950s to about the 1970s, psychology was being born. You had, Freud in the beginning, and then you had all sorts of famous people. And these famous people were in maybe the 50s through, let's say, the 80s. And Maslow is one of those people. And they really set the stage for psychology in general and what I would do inside of a therapy session. And self-actualization is those, if you're self-actualized, it's those who are fulfilled and doing all that they are capable of. It refers to a person's desire for self-fulfillment. They don't cling to the familiar. They're not threatened or frightened by change or differences. They're happy in their own skin. No jealousy. They have minimal anxiety with guarded, genteel caution in times like these. Maslow came up with a hierarchy of needs. And the needs start with physiological. That would mean like water, food, air, the real practical stuff. Then safety, meaning you might need housing, you might need employment, personal security. Now, some of us might be at that stage just because our work, we've been laid off. But if you can try to put your mind in a higher place, even though you're doing practical things at a lower stage, if you look at the triangle, lower stage of development of growth, you can rise above it, at least in your brain, and release some of the anxiety that you have. So the next level of needs that one would have is to have love and attachment. So you need some kind of unconditional love. That would be, remember that's like Rogers, another name that's familiar as Maslow. Unconditional love, support, belonging, attachment to a family, a group, and a society. The next level would be to have esteem. esteem for yourself, respect, status, recognition, strength, and freedom. Now, some of us are just working no matter what the age is. And by the way, you move around in these levels. You might be really concentrated on safety now, but then you're working within self-actualization and you come back and work in esteem. It's just delineating how hard it is to get to the top, and also that we move around. So the last step, which would be self-actualization, would be a connection to your highest self, a desire to become the most that one can be. And what's interesting is to understand that all of us may move into that with age, and then some of us never get there. So even the awareness that there's a higher level to be had and a striving for that higher level can actually relieve your anxiety even during this time. With self-actualization, one leans towards being curious, having openness to change, and going with the flow in a sense of adventure. Oh, I wanted to ask, on your piece of paper that I asked you to get out before, just put at what age on average do people become, usually, if they're ever going to get there, self-actualized? I'll give you 2 seconds. It's 65 years old. So, in terms of self-actualization, I guess I'm not there yet. But on the other hand, if I were to become self-actualized, I think it's obvious why 65 is a key age. And it has to do with retirement. Your kids move out of the house. You start thinking about your life in general, as in review. And you start looking forward to retirement and to the last, let's say, 20 years of your life that you might actually enjoy in a different way. Just as a side note, did you know the highest group of people entering school, other than regular college age students and 20-year-olds, that are going to college for the first time, is 65-year-olds. They're going back to school and doing something completely different. That's part of that striving for self-actualization. And that will help us with the anxiety. 12 characteristics of a self-actualized person. Now on this one, I'd like you on your piece of paper just to put a little tick if you think that you might be this. Okay, so we're going to see how many of the 12 are we personally. Now you don't have to go and admit it to anybody, but just in general to think about maybe you have room to grow, or maybe you're doing pretty well. And if you're doing pretty well, then the anxiety should be less, just for the sake of knowing that you're on the right path. And I think the photo here is pretty cool, that we're striving after something and the journey is just as important as the end goal. So number one, do you embrace the unknown and the ambiguous? Do you accept yourself together with all your flaws? Do you prioritize and enjoy the journey, not just the destination? While they are usually inherently unconventional, do they seek not to shock or disturb? So you can be rebellious in your own way, but keep it to yourself so that you're growing and that you're on the right path without showing it off to somebody else or hurting someone else. You're motivated by growth, not by the satisfaction of needs. You have a purpose, a meaning in life which holds you centered. You're not troubled by the small things. You see the larger problems as something that incites a plan, something that will incite a plan done with serenity. You're grateful for small things and for large things. You share deep relationships with a few, but you also feel identification and affection towards the entire human race. You're humble. You deliberately make your own decisions selecting what you see as good and rejecting what is bad. They're not perfect, and they know this deeply. During this time of COVID, they use forgiveness, insight, care, and empathy towards each other. If you've got around 5 or 6, you're really doing well. This is something that you grow your whole life on. It's not something that you get right away. The next skill is communication skills. As I've said before, the words that you say are so important. And sometimes even when I get snappy at home or I have a hard time, my words come out so sharp and so able to hurt someone. And did I mean to? Did I mean to hurt the best person in my life, my husband? Of course not. The truth is sometimes it just slips out. The ease of using words that are not thought out, that are a little bit too quick, is something that you should just take a stop, a pause. And when you pause and reconfigure, center on your mantra, your 3 adjectives that you'd like to be: educated, calm, kind, good, you'll be able to then reconstruct words that won't be quite as sharp. So one way of building our faith and confidence and then lessening our anxiety is to express our feelings and emotions verbally. The more that we use language to share and express ourselves to our loved ones, the more that we are connected and communicating. So be deliberate with our words. Express clearly our real feelings and intentions. Try to be calm with what you say. That's probably pretty hard for me to take a break sometimes when I'm speaking. It actually makes you feel a little bit more peaceful if I slow it down. The problem is in a presentation like this, I'm trying to get out a lot of information, so I tend to just say it. And if you pause, even when you're talking to your child, even if you whisper a little bit, but with kindness, you'll have a better effect on people. So language matters. It's your tone of voice, the speed, the loudness. Instead of saying, sometimes you can say, I have to stay home, I can't stand it, right? Because we're shuttled, put into isolation and shuttered down in our houses. Instead of saying that, you're saying, I'm staying home to save lives. Instead of, I don't have the freedom to do some of the things that I wish to do, think, I'm thankful for everything that I can do. Instead of, I'm out of my routine and everything has changed, think, here's my chance to find new ways to challenge myself and a new way to stay in the moment creatively. Instead of we are failing at everything is different, think, many things might change, and in times of stress, people are the most creative. They're the most resilient and most open to improvements. I'd like to be a part of those improvements. Remember too, 95% of what you say is conveyed through body language. So your body language, if you're open and you have a calm face, for example, if I'm like this all the time, or I'm in your face, my social distance is, frankly, I could use social distance, but what I mean is your distance from the speaker could be either too close or too far. Watch the way your body is reacting. For example, are you pointing a lot? Are you giving tension through the way you look? Or is it more of a kind resolve that in your body, you actually can express what you're feeling? So your body actually, especially your face, has something called mirror neurons. And it means there's neurons or receptors in your face that pick up what the other person's face looks like and what they're feeling without even them saying one word. And these are called mirrors because you're mirroring to them and they're mirroring to you, right? It's back and forth. And so we perceive what other people are saying and meaning through their looks on their faces. We're interpreting and we're analyzing their expressions before they even say a word. So if we watch that, and if we watch how we come across, sometimes we can lessen our own anxiety by putting something on our face that then the other person perceives, they mirror it, and their calmness is shown on their face, and I start to pick that up. So do you see how it's a cycle back and forth? And it's something that you wouldn't believe that it would happen, except in this therapy that I do, I can sometimes get a person just to calm down if I act as if I'm calm. Bring it down. They're getting excited, they're getting overwhelmed, they're telling me a story. If I just calm it down and put a little bit of affection, a little bit of understanding, empathy, they can pick that up without my saying anything. So there's this skill, and in addictions, we do this all the time. It's an AA saying, and it's act as if. So you act as if, or you fake it till you make it. And when you fake it, you actually start to exude the right mirror neurons, and the spiraling will go up, and you'll feel much better. So it's something to consider, your speed, your tone of voice, and your body language. When we talk about worry, it's interesting that worry actually calms down biologically your brain for just a little while when you're anxious. So if you start to wring your hands and you say, oh, I'm just thinking about it, and you're ruminating and you're worrying and worrying, this is a skill, not a skill, but a habit done by people to try to calm themselves down. It actually works for the short run. Gives you something to do. It makes you sound as though you're really involved in it and you're really getting into it. You're worrying, right? You can't get it out of your mind. But the truth is, in the long run, worry exacerbates anxiety. It pushes the stress over the top. In the beginning, you feel like you have something to do, so you know you're going to worry. For example, if there's a big test coming up, you're going to worry and you're going to go into panic, and that's your job, right? You're going to get nervous. But the truth is if you can psych yourself out by thoughts and by making some kind of peacefulness within you, you'll have a better handle on anxiety for the long run. The anxiety will go down. Your worrying will stop. Worrying is not going to help anybody. It's only going to push anxiety and stress over the top. Different ways of working with worry or stress is to make a list of what's bothering you. You know, the idea of making lists for me, and it's an evidence-based practice. That means there's research behind it. Making a list is something that helps with anxiety like crazy. Make a list of your worries, make a list of what you have to do, make a list, I'll say later on, like of a sleep journal or of a grateful journal. Making lists in general tend to really calm down anxiety in people. And in this bullet point, the second one, it says make a list of what's bothering us today with solutions, and maybe even possible solutions. And then let another list be of what we can't change and we can't handle. So you're going to make a list of all the things you're worried about, and the ones that you can work with, and the ones that you can do even a little tiny crack into the solution. You're going to list those on one list. Then on the other list is the ones that we really can't do much about. The way that our government is working, whether you like it, whether you don't like it. But if you don't like it, or if you have some concerns about it, put them on the second list. There's not too many of us that work in politics. We can't do much until we go to vote. Or maybe we can, do social activism. That's fine. But for most of us, that would be on the second list. So the list that you can put aside, you know that those worries are there. And you just place them in a special place. And you can look at it from time to time, but you know that it's there. But for today, that's not your struggle. You're going to struggle or try at something that really you can make a solution to, that you can make headway on. Maybe it's calling a friend. Maybe it's doing a little bit of work around the house, cleaning the washrooms. Whatever it is, you can do something about. And that will make you feel better because you have a list of practical things that you can go forward with. Anxiety is actually biologically linked. It's linked to the amygdala. And the amygdala is an organ inside of your brain. And if you put a line through your eye and through your ear, that organ is located right behind the eye where the two lines would meet. And it's called the amygdala, which gives you the impression that there's one of them. Turns out it's really amygdalae because there's two of them. There's one behind each eye and behind each ear. That's one. It's called amygdala because in Greek, the word amygdalae or amygdala means almond, and it's almond shaped. So it's a small little organ, and its only purpose in life is to create anxiety, to create sympathetic nervous system symptoms like flight, freeze, fright. Those things is what the amygdala was programmed to do. So when you're having worry, if you can say to yourself, oh, that's my amygdala, it's okay, I have to calm it down. And what does the amygdala do? It sends out these hormones that, make your mouth dry, your stomach feels nauseated, you might sweat, you're really getting upset. And what all those symptoms are about is trying to get your body ready to flee, right? If you have all your blood going to your stomach like you're digesting and you've eaten recently, you'll be weighed down. You won't run as fast as you could, right? So when you have a dry mouth, it's so that you won't eat anything more and cause your body to pay attention to what's in your stomach. Because remember, we're under a fear response. So we want to just get going as fast as possible. So the symptoms that the amygdala is creating inside of your body are done for a purpose. And one way of looking at it is to look at cavemen. I really think this is funny because are you going to live long if you go over to a cougar or some kind of saber-toothed tiger and say, what a cute little kitty that is, gorgeous kitty, and your hand is eaten, right? We are descendants of people who actually were scared. So the more scared you were, the more you live, right? So the point is that the amygdala is doing its job. It's doing a good job. So the way to calm it down, there's a few tricks to calm it down. For example, you can make saliva in your mouth, and that kind of tells the brain to calm down. You can breathe deeply through your tummy, and that's called diaphragmatic breathing, deep in your diaphragm. It's sort of like a little kid where your stomach is going in and out. And what you're doing is massaging the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is, what vagus means is sort of like vagabond, right? It's got the same front word on the word, right? The prefix. And what it means is the nerve goes all over your body, but the main stem is in your back, right? On your brain, on your spine. And as you're breathing, and if you breathe low in your tummy, you actually are starting to massage that nerve to calm yourself down. How many breaths does it take to calm yourself down? Usually about 10. And when you breathe, it's always, this is just how it's done, is to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. In through your nose, let's say slowly, maybe on the count of 5 or 7. Hold it for about 4, and then breathe out. And when you breathe out, if you can breathe out slowly, like you're breathing through a straw, or maybe even blowing a pinwheel. And if you breathe in and breathe out, and you do this in a sequence, you can calm yourself down, and there's a noticeable shift of your intention. And when you're breathing, you can either clear your brain like mindfulness, or you can actually go back to those adjectives and to that mantra that will center you, and you'll give yourself a chance. Another way of doing the breathing is more like a sigh. Did you ever know why, your mother would go, right? Well, the sigh is breathing. It's actually putting your tensions and your anxiety into the breath that you're breathing out. So one way of doing it more modern type is to put your hands up and then put them down with the breath. So you're going to go, helps to give you a little more control, a little more feeling that you're putting the anxiety out there and not within. Okay, if we go back to the amygdala is really set up so to give us triggers, the sweating, the nervousness, to create a plan in your life. The next step for the amygdala is telling us, make a plan, get away from that cougar, right? So what are we going to do? Or we're going to freeze, right? That's our plan. We're going to freeze and act like a rock and hope they don't smell us, right? Okay, so you focus on the plan and the work that needs to be done in order to survive and carry out our lives. Try not to ruminate. It's not going to help you. What's going to help you is to stop, notice that your body is having these symptoms for a reason, and your heart's pounding a lot, right? If it's pounding, it's certainly not having a heart attack, right? I'm not a doctor. I have no medical knowledge, but I know if it's pounding, it's doing pretty well. What it's trying to do is pump blood into your brain, into your body in order for you to react. And remember, when you get too much blood, what happens is your prefrontal cortex gets filled with blood. And have you ever heard of the saying, I'm seeing red like a bull, or I'm looking through red? Well, what you're actually doing in that case is looking through the blood of the prefrontal cortex that's being filled. And when you have anxiety and that blood's up there, you're blocking the prefrontal cortex ability to have insight, judgment, things that are really deep, like thinking. It all occurs right up here in the forehead. That's why when people have big foreheads, maybe like mine, you're considered, in the 1400s, 1300s to be quite intelligent. And it has to do with what is located right here, is all the things that we tend to think of ourselves as being human. So when we're in anxiety, we are not allowing the brain to function in the way that could be the most productive for us. So what we're going to do instead is develop a plan, divide up the plan into small chunks so we can carry it out, and then we can really work on something productive. And in that productive flow, or getting in the flow of it, you will find that the anxiety is forgotten. Another skill would be to develop a worry time. So if you are burdened by worry and anxiety, give yourself a half hour a day, or maybe even an hour. You schedule it for what time you think you need. So at 8 p.m., I'm going to worry and think about all the horrible things of COVID-19. I'm going to really stress out, but I'm going to keep it within that time. And then in the rest of the day, I'm actually going to try to enjoy what I can. That's another tool for you. I went over the biology of the amygdala already, but to give you a little bit of a feeling, the information that you get right into your brain comes from your senses, right? Your eyes, your nose, your tasting, your hearing, and your touch, right? So the information goes in as energy, right? So it's going in, it goes to the thalamus. The thalamus is sort of a traffic director. And the thalamus decides whether that energy, especially if it's a fearful thing, let's talk about something like anxiety, it either goes directly to the amygdala, or the energy will go to the cortex and then go to the amygdala. And when it goes to the cortex, which is sort of that gray matter that's in your head, you're analyzing what's happening. So for example, You might have anxiety over something that triggers a memory from childhood, or maybe this COVID reminds you of some of the other viruses that we've had, mad cow, whatever. And that is your brain thinking and making a connection, a trigger. And then it says, oh yeah, I should be scared of that. And it goes to the amygdala so that the amygdala can send out the fear hormones and get some kind of fear reaction. Okay, or if the energy comes in and it's dangerous enough, let's say a flood, and animals attacking us, we're being beat up, it automatically goes to the amygdala, and the amygdala sends out the message to start pumping, to start flowing that blood around, to really give us energy, right? It's a adrenaline boost that it's pushing for. And the reason why there's two different ways is that the direct way to the amygdala is a faster connection. So it may actually save your life. It's a matter of nanoseconds. But if you have to get out of the way, or you have a big ball coming at your face, to move quickly would be a good idea. And you're not really going to think about it. So there's two ways to get over anxiety because of the two paths that your brain is taking. One is, when it goes to the cortex, is to talk to yourself logically, to use something called CBT. It's cognitive behavioral therapy. It's where you have a cognition, a thought in your brain, and that cognition is making you have a feeling that invokes a behavior, right? So you're trying to recondition what you're thinking about. You could say, well, that memory that I had before, it wasn't that bad, or this isn't connected really to now, so it's different. You try to rewrite the statement, the thought that you're having, in a way that makes it more plausible not to incite anxiety. But on the other hand, if the anxiety comes in and it's just something like COVID, where you're feeling death is upon us, or fear, really strong fear, one way is to get over it is just by exposure, right? The more you sort of feel that, okay, it seems as though not too many people I know have it, I'm doing okay, I'm taking all the precautions, and you start to get used to, right, what do they say on the news? A new normal, right? You'll calm down with some time. You'll get used to the constrictions and you'll be able to calm down. So the amygdala learns through exposure, and the cortex will learn through something called CBT, or rewriting your statements so they're a little gentler, they're a little bit kinder, so you don't have that anxiety reaction. Okay, let me go on. Okay, it's really important to verbalize or to communicate what you're feeling. Okay, so it's very, very important when you're in anxiety not to stuff your emotions down. You let them out. You talk to your loved ones. You talk to a good friend. And if you don't have anybody, get yourself a counselor. Talk to somebody at least once a week about your feelings, about your emotions. You know what's really interesting? I always do this with patients in my office, is that if I ask you right now on that piece of paper, list for 10 seconds, I'm going to give you 10 seconds, list as many emotions as you can. Go ahead, just emotions. If I give you a few, I'll be giving it. Try not to read the slide. So I'll give you 10 seconds, just write down as many emotions as you can do. On average, a person, no matter what age, what walk of life, no matter how many degrees, or how much exposure to life, or how much information they're used to gathering, people will come up with 5. Something like sad, happy, surprise, maybe rejected. I can't even come up with another one. The more emotions that you're able to verbalize, the more you'll be able to specifically tell someone that you love what you're upset about. For example, what's the difference between elation, joy, happiness, calmness? All very similar words, but very different connotations, right? The denotation might be similar, but the connotation, what it means to you or what it means in specific can be very different. So it's really important to be able to express your words. For example, if you're suffering and you're in that time of worry, right? You're in your worry period. You could say words like emptiness, void, confusion, frustration, boredom, empathy, suffering, sadness, worry, rumination, horror, malaise, numbness, loneliness, insignificance, despair, anguish, anger, apathy, disgust, guilt, isolation, depression. Sometimes writing in a journal your feelings really gets it out of the psyche on the paper and it calms you down. So writing of any type is a hand-eye coordinated event. And they found, again, evidence-based, research-based, that this is an activity that will calm down your anxiety. So write down your feelings, talk them out to your loved ones, find yourself a counselor, anything to do to get those emotions out, and then learn lots of vocabulary in order to really specifically pinpoint what you're feeling and how you're feeling. But of course, these are the negatives, right? These are the negative emotions. The positive emotions, I'd like you to be able to use for the rest of the day. So I want you to try to stay, I always say something like, don't be a Debbie Downer, right? Don't try to dwell on those negative emotions. Keep them in that time period. And then try to use positive emotions. And what words would I say to that? Well, compassion, sympathy, strength, admiration of those that are able to help directly, overcoming, determination, triumph, comfort, connection, intensity, plans, interest, validation, connection, nostalgia, future anticipation, appreciation, gratefulness, calmness, serenity, humility, devotion, loyalty, pride in doing things without direct compensation or without directly seeing the effects, reflection, determination, a shift of goals, modification, scheduling to bring about time for goals. The importance of using the right words and to express yourself fully will actually bring down your anxiety. Take the time to express to those that you love and those that you're really, really fond of, the positive emotions that you've experienced while being with them, the emotions that recap your relationship with them. Don't let a tomorrow come without saying today what you mean to them. Because, you know, as we all know, these times are difficult. But if we express our love and devotion and kindness, we can actually start to build a higher world. So when we're talking about emotions, don't be afraid to cry. Crying is okay for men, for women. It actually releases a hormone, makes you feel better. Don't be afraid to verbalize. Try very hard to expand your vocabulary. We have to reach out to each other. We have to communicate. We've heard this on the news, right? Call some older people, make sure the young are taken care of, make sure that the young people are able to express their fears. They don't understand why they're at home from school. They don't understand why mom's upset or why mom and dad are home. So just try to have phone calls, texts, Skype, use your social media to reach out to each other. Keep gratefulness there and try very hard to keep a balance between talking your stress and also regaining the momentum of feeling good and saying some good things. And what's the balance? The balance should be about 1 to 12. So 1 being about an hour of feeling bad, and then try to use the rest of the day, the 12 hours that are left, let's say, for good things. It will release your anxieties. It will lighten your stress. Another way of using a skill, it's called ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's talking about using goals and using values. And one way of doing these things, I'm actually going to hurry it up because look at the time, but we'll get to some concrete things to do too. These are all sort of existential, a little bit in the air, is to make your goals and then your values. Stay to your values and try to work on your goals every day, even though we are stuck at home. Relationships, okay? So when you're talking about relationships, the anxiety that it produces is sometimes unmanageable, right? Family is irreplaceable, but it's also not all the time chosen, right? You choose your mate, but you don't choose everybody else. Friendships are precious, but friends can put pressure on you too. So when you're talking about relationship reminders, stop and think just a minute before saying something. Don't expect mind reading. Criticize the behavior, not the people. Offer compromise. Be specific on your criticism. When you criticize somebody, make sure that it's in a ratio of 5 compliments to 1 negative. It's funny because if you see me sometimes with my kids, I'm coming up with things to say good in order to get in 1 zinger, right? Well, that's not exactly what you should be doing, but it should be a balance of 5 to 1, meaning far more compliments to your criticism. Express your positivity and support. Offer to do what's not easy to do, and realize the person in front of you is in this together. And also cherish the young ones. There's a guy, he's Don Ruiz, and he starts out every relationship with 4 simple things. Try to stay truthful, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. If you stay with those, your anxiety will be much, much better. What if you have anxiety right now? Okay, so you're hanging just like this flower from the edge. Okay, don't try to suppress your anxiety. Anxiety is a part of life. We're not going to get rid of it totally. What we're going to do is try to live with it. And if I continue to say, don't think about your anxiety, don't think about your anxiety, what's happening is you can't think about anything else. Like as if I was to describe pink elephants and I keep saying it, you're making a pathway in your brain and you can't stop thinking about it. What you need to do is replace those anxious thoughts with some good thoughts, with your mantra, with your adjectives, with strength, with vocabulary that's good. If you replace, it actually allows you to stop thinking about the pink elephant or the anxiety. So don't go into rumination. Give yourself reassurance, like with your mantra. Don't avoid responsibilities or ask other people to step in from you, because it only makes things worse. Shift your perspective about anxiety to it not being a bad thing. It's something that will protect us from the cougar, remember? It's going to protect us from harm. We practice acceptance and kindness, slow your breathing down, and there's an app that you can get on the phone. You know, there's a lot of apps for mindfulness, the idea of slowing down and thinking about something that is just calming. And if a thought comes in that's distressful or contiguous to something, you tend to clear your mind and just don't have a judgment about thoughts that are coming in. Just try not to think more about them. We're all human. We have a lot of thoughts. If you do it 5 to 10 minutes, let's say once or twice a day for 6 weeks, it's a long time. It's like brushing your teeth, right? You don't brush your teeth all at once. You do a little bit every day. Your brain actually is able to focus better on more calming things. And you can use it when you're starting to have anxiety. And you know, the apps on your phone, the reason why I looked at it is this app for breathe, slowing your breath down. Well, there's apps for mindfulness. There's loads of them. There's Calm, iChill, Headspace, Mindbliss, Meditation Made Simple, it's like de jour. It's just the JOUR. Relax Melodies, Taking Guided Meditation. These are all apps that you can put on your phone for free, and they'll help you through mindfulness. There's a yoga app, actually, that doing yoga is amazing because you're pairing exercise with brain relaxation, with mindfulness, and it's becoming balance, and that's also free. The idea is, if you're having anxiety right now, to work on things along the way that will lessen it, and you'll be able to turn to mindfulness when you need it. You'll be able to turn to these things that you train your brain to go to during anxiety: breathing, yoga, exercise. The thing with exercise, it's a left-right stimulation. And anytime you can stimulate your left and right, meaning walking, running, or even clicking back and forth, you'll actually have the brain talking to the two sides, talking a little bit easier to each other. I mean, talking figuratively. And it will open up the blood and actually will calm you down. So that's just a technique. It's called grounding techniques, that if you click, you can have somebody try to calm down. It works. Walking, clicking, tapping, there's all these solutions. Okay, existential therapy for yourself. I just wish you to be spiritual, to be kind, to do small things for each other. And actually, this is where I'll end at this point. There's 2 or 3 quotes at the bottom that you can focus on again as your mantra. The smallest, I'll show you the rest of the slides just for the sake of completeness, but the smallest candle can overcome the darkness. Can we sit in the darkness and dare to believe in the light? We try to concentrate on the present. That's why we call it a gift, the present. Concrete ways of lessening stress, you can look at those yourself. Limit your constant reading. Go to reliable sources. Organization or cleaning is always a way of lessening your stress. Clean the clutter. Disinfect. Put limits on your work time so that you're out of work by 5 or 6 o'clock. Get out of your head and into your life. Start doing something. Be proud of your emotions. Adapt. Alter, change, have gratitude, forgive, vent, and talk. These are recovery strategies. If you start to feel really, really anxious, as almost in terms of a panic attack, you can use some of these techniques. I think you could read those and you'll get the picture. If you look up SOS, that's a very common way of recentering yourself and stopping and having a strategy to overcome. This is a slide about nightmares because of the anxiety. Actually, if you go on Wheaton Patch, I wrote an article, and actually Lisa Favor wrote the article. She's a wonderful author, and she wrote it from an interview with me, and it will go over this type of nightmare survival because of the anxiety. When to seek help. If you're really hopeless, if you're having panic attacks, if you have extreme appetite loss, if you have nausea, suicidal, really monitor those strong feelings. Go to the hospital. Go find a professional counselor. How do you do that? Well, there's an app actually online called Bark, B-A-R-K, like barking dog, and you put in the service that you want, including psychotherapy, and up comes people like me with qualifications. You can also look on Psychology Today. You can call your insurance company. You can ask at the hospital for referrals. And you're always welcome to call me, and I can give you a referral to somebody else if it's not in my area of specialty, or I can give you to a friend. You don't have to come to me. I could just give you some referrals. And by the way, if something has triggered you tonight and you feel too self-conscious to talk about, I'm always willing to take a phone call. And, you know, if it takes me an hour to talk it out, that's my mission. It's not just my work. It's my spiritual chance to help and to reach out to the world. So try to give me a chance. You don't have to stay with me for more than an hour. Of course, it's free, and I can give you some referrals. Remember, we're trained, we're confidential, we're completely trained to work with these things. One service, these are all like disaster lines, suicide hotlines. The one that I really advise, and why don't you give it to your kids too, if you have kids or young ones, is to text home to the number, just like the phone number that you'd put in, 741-741, and you text home. And what's really cool about this is a counselor will come up online as though they're texting to you, and you can talk to them 24/7. And why I say the kids is if they're at a party and something's happening, maybe they're having drugs or doing something that they don't want their parents to know, but they don't know how to get out of the situation either. Somebody like me will get on and really be empathetic and really help. And this line is confidential. They can't turn around and, use it against you or say anything. It's just to help you out of the situation, and you can call as often as you want. These are my references, and I tend to work with the top group, the mental illness and substance abuse at Johns Hopkins. I really like National Alliance on Mental Illness. SAMHSA is Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. That's a wonderful resource for you guys. If you just go online and put in NAMI or put in MISA, up will come, and you can put any type of mental illness, any type from anxiety to stress to panic attacks to psychosis to ADHD, you can get help. And these are the sources that I would go to. In any case, that's my card, and there's my phone number. Jot it down if you want, not just for me, but for anybody that you might like to be connected to. And I can connect you to, let's say, a sleep specialist, to a psychiatrist, for anybody that you might like within the mental health field. Okay, I thank you for listening. I'm sorry I'm a little bit over, and maybe Courtney will take over.
Thank you so much, Joan. That was full of such wonderful information. And thank you all for joining us.